Welcome back to the Property Tank, guys. I'm PK, bringing you unfiltered property insights every Monday. Powered by littlefishproperty.com and our ReadyBuild solutions, the best value in knockdown rebuilds and dual occupancy. You can book a call with me anytime. The QR code is on the screen, and for all you property nerds out there, join the Little Fish Network. Thousands of members and endless resources to help you win at property. Let's get into the show. All right, guys, first topic, something we've been seeing coming across our headlines is that Melbourne has turned the corner. So Melbourne is leading the way in February for increase in property prices. So encouraging, yes. It's been on the canvas for a long time as far as the numbers go. And the others, mainly sort of Queensland, WA, have been quite warm, quite hot. So interesting to see that turnaround in Feb. It's only 1 month, as we know, but it could be the sign of things to come. Let's get into the article. Stunning Melbourne turnaround puts end to brief national downturn. A 3-month property downturn has ended, with every real estate market in Australia outside Darwin recording price increases in February. So, Bonnie, if you can bring up the graph there, we've got Melbourne, we've got Hobart, posting the 0.4% increase, which is superior to all the other states and territories. Now, bring your attention to the quarter, the annual, and even the total return there. It's interesting because Melbourne has been in the negatives the last quarter and for the last year. And the only ones that have been in the negative for the last year is slightly Hobart and slightly Canberra. So Melbourne's been the underperformer across all the states and territories in Australia for the last year. So it had to turn around at some point, and it sounds like it is. Is this a sign of things to come? Will this continue? Because as you can see there from an annual perspective, Perth 14% over the last year, Adelaide's up nearly 12%. Which is fantastic, and Brisbane's nearly up 10% over the annual term as well. So that's why we've got, like I've said in some earlier podcasts, that's why we've got buyers advocates across the country, the media starting to switch their attention to Melbourne because it has been extremely subdued, and these other markets will not continue growing at that pace.
So, do you think it's going to stick?
Power. Is it going to stick? Is it going to continue? Well, that is the million-dollar question. I think it's a trend we're going to see. We talked about it. We talked about it last year, late last year and early this year. I think it will continue as these other states ease off and slow down and Melbourne goes the other way. So I think it will continue. But in saying that, in our markets, what we're dealing with, like boots on the ground, our sales, buying land, things like that, buying property for people, you don't notice an upturn like that. They're just numbers. That's just a headline grab, 0.4%, like that's something you just don't feel, and we're not really seeing on the ground. So it'll be interesting to see when we do feel it shift in, maybe this first quarter, second quarter, third quarter this year, when we do see it actually move, what that will generate from a numbers perspective and how the data will feel for that. Because once we do feel it, I feel like then you might be talking about 3, 4, 5%, which is significant when you're talking about $1 million property. You're talking about things going up $50,000. So I think it will, but as we know, power, great question, and we will continue to keep everyone updated on that, but I think it will. Okay, guys, to summarize before we move on, this is good. This is a good thing. February, great month for Melbourne, back on top where we belong. No, only joking, but we're back on top. So will we see this happen? We will follow along, but probably just a headline grab at this point, but good to see it equaling out and turning around. And like Power said, will it be sticky? Time will tell, we'll see, but we are tipping it will be. And getting into the next one, guys, this one's super interesting. It's here in Melbourne, Greater Melbourne, and it's Melbourne's next high-rise infill development suburbs revealed. So this is obviously to combat the lack of housing that's been very well reported that we are going through, lack of new housing and accommodation for people coming into the country, coming into Victoria, and this is what this is going to combat. So they're looking to increase density around 50 overall, but they have named the last 25 activity zones that they're looking to intensify the density and intensify population around those areas, and they are centred around trams and trains and that transport infrastructure. So let's get into it. The final 25 train and tram zones where the Victorian government is changing planning rules and increasing housing density in Melbourne has been revealed. So I'll reel off a few of these. We've got a bit of a list here in the article. We've got Carnegie, Hughesdale, Murrumbeena, Oakley. They're nice areas for the fish. We are bullish on those for some of these reasons. We've got Footscray, West Footscray, and Tottenham stations. Loving those areas. Hawthorn, Glenferrie, Auburn, Blackburn, Nunawading, Mitchin stations. So interesting there. We've got Toorak, Armidale, Malvern. We've got Brighton, Hampton, and Sandringham. So some good areas there. And then you get into sort of Glen Iris, around your Taronga train stations and Darling station. So there's some of the areas that we are, or that the state government are looking to increase the density. Now, there's a few things to think about here. So, as we know, as people know, we're heavily in property development as well as property here at Little Fish. So, being able to make these endeavours affordable is a super interesting topic. Over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen building prices essentially double. And potentially slightly more than double. So that's what we've seen. And you know, the media is very good at saying it's gone up 30%, 40%, but that's just not accurate. So building prices have doubled in sort of 5 to 6 years. So changing these rules and regulations is one thing, and it's great, and it's a great initiative. There is some other things around that, like they're doing it around transport. That's fine, but what about schools? Amenity parks, the list goes on, all these, medical centres, all these type of, I guess, businesses and things that people rely on in their everyday lives. Are they going to be in these areas? Are they thinking about these things? Simply just public transport, is that enough to then highly densify these areas, put a lot of people into them? Are they actually still going to work as activity centres and live there? So
is the most important thing transport links in these areas? Is that what I should be thinking about if I'm going to buy?
Yeah, so great point. And like I said earlier, there seems to be a focus on intensifying the density in these areas with transport. But when we look for real estate, there's a long list, as you know, of things that we do look at. Transport is a big one, and that can depend on the type of marketplace and the type of consumer that you're looking to get into these areas. So for me, public transport is probably around, your younger population and younger market that use that public transport, professionals that need to get into the city, these sorts of people. So it's just an interesting one, because increasing the density from building high density in apartments, you probably assume you are tackling that more of a younger generation, which is fine, but we've still got that older population where, kids, they rely on things in that area. They may not be travelling into the city. So that's an important one. That's an important point. Like we look at school zones. They're super important. When people are moving to an area, we look at recreational reserves. We look at villages, shops, Woolworths, Coles, all these sorts of infrastructure hubs, medical centres, hospitals. These are all the things that we're looking for when we're looking to buy real estate. So are all these little activity centres going to have all this? So that remains to be seen, Power. But for me, you need to look at the market that you're looking to appeal to. And for me, the public transport play is a bit more about probably your younger professionals, younger families, and definitely maybe older families, but probably need to get into the city, or that public transport's going to be useful to them. So yes, great question. Also, getting back to increasing the density in these areas, again, it's about the cost it is to develop. The cost to develop is extremely expensive. So developers that they want to bring back to these areas, they've got a dilemma to say, hey, great, the rules have changed, things have opened up, we can do higher level in these areas, potentially, obviously create more dwellings, more revenue for the developer, more dwellings to sell, that's fine. But what we've found in the last few years is that it's hard to get these to stack up. So I think in this article, when we dig deeper, and we'll put the link below, some people from property councils and these sort of leaders in our industry have suggested, which I agree with, that maybe there's some tax concessions for developers to go in there and to actually make the effort, spend the money, spend the time and resource. It needs to be viable for them as a development opportunity. So there needs to be more done than just the regulations altered, because developing is expensive, and building high and building high density apartment blocks and these sorts of things is super expensive. And with real estate prices, just lagging, like we said earlier, like Melbourne's turned the corner, but we are lagging somewhat. So you've got this dilemma that developers have got. Property prices are a bit flat. Cost to build is quite high and quite inflated. So I think there needs, if we want density around these areas, something needs to be done also on the viability of these sites. So anyway, that's another one. But that's essentially what's going on there. So exciting. State government's getting involved. We're going to try and fix the lack of housing that's out there, but a few other steps need to be made. Not just doing these things, grabbing a headline, saying, hey, this will fix it. No, it won't fix it, because developers will not go there and put their money into these projects unless there's a profit at the end. So I think some more needs to be done about that imbalance between real estate resale and the cost of building. Thanks, guys. And before I wrap up, I want to touch on the development tank dropping this Thursday, 3 o'clock. Guru's back. Guru's bought 3-4 sites in the last couple of weeks. So
are you still getting bargains?
Oh, power. Are we still getting bargains? Yes. Well, I think we did and we are. So that's the interesting thing, right? We've got the headline saying, hey, Melbourne's back growing again. I think it's important, if you're out there buying, just to be cautious, like in the development tank, that make sure you subscribe and turn the bell notifications on so you don't miss the development tank. But we had a client that missed out at auction for $1,580,000, missed out. Gav pulled them out and said, hey, chill out. There'll be other ones. They went sort of a little bit past their limit for a development site out in Doncaster East. A couple of weeks later, they then bought another development site not that far away for 1.4. So I think that's a great example. And there were some other factors, so I'm not saying they're exactly apples for apples, but for a client that's looking to do their first development site, the difference between paying 1.4 and 1.58 or nearly 1.6 is a real thing. So yes, there are still bargains out there, but you just want to be savvy and you don't want to get caught up in the theatrics of an auction day. So that auction went for 1.58 that our client didn't buy, and we bought before auction for 1.4 for that client. So Gav's going to get into that in the development tank, but 180K. Now, don't jump in the comments and berate me because they're not the exact same site, but there's still a great development sites, both great development sites in Doncaster East. So there were some differences, but like I said, I think the main point is you have someone doing a development for the first time that's spent $200,000 less, and they're essentially embarking on quite the similar thing. So I think that's a real sort of lesson for anyone out there, that if we can play a little bit cheaper but play the same game for a little bit cheaper, I think that's super important. So yes, and Gav's bought some other sites as well, which he'll mention in the development tank. So make sure you jump in there and suss it out. But yes, there are bargains. The headlines will start to come this year, but make sure you're not diving in with any FOMO if it does start to heat up. It's not heated up yet, but as we said, February, we feel like we've turned a corner. So will that continue? And if it does, don't get too excited. Keep your powder dry, do your due diligence, do your homework, and make sure that you are in fact finding value, because the value still lives there and the value will continue this year, in my opinion. All right, guys, that's it. Till next time, until next week, Monday, 3 o'clock. Keep doing your homework, keep doing your work, and tuning in. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss anything. Those who are in Victoria have enjoyed a long weekend. It's nearly over, so enjoy the rest of it. Do what you want to do and enjoy your week in property. Let's go, guys.